So you want to sleep like a baby in a tent. Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Dan. I am into backpacking, hiking, gear, all that stuff. If you guys are into that stuff too, just go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That's what you're gonna get when you're watching this channel. So you're here probably because maybe it's your first time backpacking, or you've been backpacking a while and you are not getting good sleep at night. And you're like, who's this guy that's gonna give me this magic solution to sleep good in a tent? And I will tell you right away, I don't have a magic solution. I'm gonna tell you how I have been able to sleep in a tent all night long with no issues whatsoever, comfortable each and every single time. So real quick, brief history. I started out hammock camping, and if you don't know what that is, it's just you grab a hammock, you tie it up between two trees, and you sleep in it. Now there's a lot of other variables that go into it, and the argument is that's the most comfortable way to sleep out on the trail, and I would agree, it is extremely comfortable. It does take some time to figure out for a lot of people, and it does take some time to dial in, so it can be kind of a challenge. But I was forced into tent camping because I bring my kids along with me. I also bring a lot of people that are first-time backpackers, so they borrow a lot of my gear, and sometimes they borrow my hammocks, so I'm stuck with the tent because I'm the nice guy, right? And then also my kids love to sleep with dad in the tent. They're not ready for the hammock just yet. So I was forced into it, and I had to go from this beautiful, comfortable sleep to not sleeping well at night in a tent, and I needed to be able to do that because if you guys know, and a lot of people preach this, is that you invest in your sleep. Now the big reason you want to invest in your sleep is pretty obvious. You've hiked a long day, you're gonna hike a long day tomorrow, you need to get some good sleep to do that, otherwise you're gonna be miserable the next day. Now I'm not really gonna talk to you about the specific gear that I use, but I will put the gear that I use down in the description below so that you can go take a look at it for yourself. It is definitely expensive gear because I do this often, but it will fit the bill for the majority of the backpackers out there. It's excellent gear, and it does help me sleep similar to how I sleep at home. I didn't bring my pillow from home, okay? I didn't bring like the comforter from home. I didn't bring the mattress from home, anything like that at all. But what I realized is that night after night after night, I sleep in a house in my own bed. And whenever you're taken out of that norm and you're put into the middle of the woods and you are trying to sleep at night, it can keep you awake. So my plan was, how can I mimic how I sleep at home in a tent? All right, so let's dive a little bit deeper. Let's talk about some of the things that I think are gonna help you guys out sleeping a little bit better. First of all, you need to make sure you've got the right tent. You wouldn't sleep at home with no roof on your house, right? You wouldn't sleep at home with your windows wide open when it's cold outside. So what do you think you're gonna do when you get out into the backcountry? You're gonna want a roof over your head that's not gonna leak. You're gonna wanna make sure that your tent is ventilated, but not to the point where you've got wind and weather whipping through all night long. So you're gonna wanna make sure that your tent is well built and waterproofed. So a couple things about your tent really quick. If you wanna make sure you don't get wet at night, one, make sure that you have a double wall tent. The single wall tents are great if you want to save weight, but the double wall tents help you from getting water on the inside of your tent, because one of the biggest problems with tents is that condensation does build up on the inside of the tent, especially when it's warmer inside the tent than it is outside the tent, you know, from breathing or just multiple people being in there. And then you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, man, it didn't rain, but how did the water get in here? Well, that's condensation. I would encourage you guys to get a double wall tent when you're starting out. I think that will help you guys out. And as you grow, if you want to get a little bit lighter, you can get a single wall tent and learn to experience that way as you get better out in the backcountry, learning how to use that tent to avoid the condensation by leaving, you know, vents open and that kind of thing. You also want to make sure that you have a good footprint underneath the tent. If you don't know what that is, it's essentially a big tarp that goes underneath your tent, but you want to make sure that it's the size of your tent or a little bit smaller than your tent. And the reason is you don't want that footprint sticking out around the outside of your tent, because rain will get on it and then it will slide in between the footprint and the bottom of your tent, which can then soak up inside of your tent, causing a lot of problems throughout the night. A footprint also protects the bottom of your tent, makes it a little bit more comfortable inside the tent, kind of thickens up the floor a little bit from some of the ground underneath you. And so that way, if you do kind of roll off a little bit, there's a little bit of extra cushion there for you, helps out, make sure you have a good footprint. Also, How good is your mattress at home? Do you sleep good at home? Most people, they've got a decent enough mattress that they're sleeping all night at home. I would encourage you to get out and find a air mattress that's going to do the same thing for you, mimic what you've got at home. And I'm not telling you to go out and buy those like super car camping, 1 foot thick air mattresses by any means, but those cheap foam pads that you can find at Walmart, or those accordion ones that you can get online, those can be very uncomfortable. And if it's going to be this huge switch for you from sleeping at home to sleeping in your tent, you're going to want to rethink that pad a little bit. You can actually find sleeping pads that you can fill with air that are much, much better than those foam ones, and can actually be even lighter than some of those foam ones. Now, I went out and got the lightest one that I could find at the time, but it was too narrow and it was too thin. It didn't work well for me. I rolled around on it at night. I would fall off of it. It was very noisy as I slept on it because there's some insulating values on the inside that would crinkle all night long. It just didn't work for me. So I opted for a much wider sleeping pad, a much thicker sleeping pad, still an air sleeping pad, weighs a little bit more, but it definitely mimics a little bit more what I have at home, and it helps me to be able to sleep at night in the tent. So maybe you've heard a lot of guys talking about quilts and sleeping quilts and how they're so much better than sleeping bags. And I would argue that they can be as good as a sleeping bag, and they will definitely save you weight. And a quilt is what I do use. But a quilt is definitely something that takes practice. And especially for newer backpackers, you may want to consider just sticking with the traditional sleeping bag. I'm not telling you to go out and get the synthetic version. I would encourage you highly to find an inexpensive down version in order to save weight, but a sleeping bag will at least help you out. Now, here's the basic difference between the two. A quilt is essentially a minimalist version of a sleeping bag. I mean, really, that's it. It doesn't have a back to it, and it doesn't really have a hood that goes over the top of you like some of the mummy bags. It's essentially a blanket that will cinch around the bottom portion of your legs into a foot box, and then you can also tighten it up around your neck to be able to kind of mimic that mummy style sleeping bag. And it is much lighter weight, and a lot of guys will argue it's the way to go. But for somebody who's starting out or who's getting used to sleeping in a tent, I would probably tell you that you should look into maybe a sleeping bag first, because it's a definite learned experience. The problem with a quilt is that when you roll around, drafts can come up underneath you. Even with pad straps, drafts can still get up underneath you. I've experienced both. A pad strap is simply being able to cinch down the sides of the quilt to the sleep pad so that it doesn't lift up around the sides of you for drafts to come in. And that's exactly why I say that oftentimes a sleeping bag can be the way to go, especially for guys who just don't backpack often. It's once in a blue moon, every other year, once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year even. You're trying to mimic what you do at home. It might be best just to go get the sleeping bag. So if you watch any of my videos, or you watch the trip videos that I've got, and I've got plenty of trip videos on my channel that you could check out, I like to sleep with 2 pillows, and I get asked all the time why I sleep with 2 pillows. Well, the biggest reason is obvious from what I told you at the beginning of this video, is that I mimic what I do at home. I sleep with 2 pillows at home. I'm a side sleeper. I roll around at night, so I sleep with 1 pillow under my head, and then I prop myself up with a 2nd pillow. Now, I could save weight and not bring the 2nd pillow, but I wouldn't sleep as good, so I want to make sure that I'm gonna sleep good at night, and I bring 2 pillows. Maybe in order to save weight, you just don't bring a pillow. I would encourage you, if you're not sleeping good at night, just bring the pillow. You'll be glad you did. You'll be better off getting the sleep at night and bringing that couple extra ounces instead of having to worry about being groggy and tired and not being able to hike very well the next day. Because nobody wants to hang out with a cranky backpacker. And finally, the last thing that I did to sleep better at night, to make it so that I was actually kind of mimicking what I did at home, and this is going to probably be strange to a lot of you guys out there, but I sleep with a fan at home. I sleep with white noise at home. I've been doing that for over 20 years. And for me to be able to sleep at night, it's helpful for me to have some sort of a sound. So if I go backpacking and there's wind going through the trees, that works for me. If it's raining and I hear the rain hitting the tent, that works for me. But if it's like dead still at night, I mean, there's not a sound anywhere, there's no draft, I mean, it's nothing. It's like you could hear a pin drop. I have a hard time sleeping. So what I've done is I found an app that gives me white noise. It just plays the sound of a fan. So I plug my phone into my battery bank, and I turn it on when I need it. And that thing will play all night long. It really doesn't drain my battery very much. I can shut it off halfway through the night if I kind of wake up and find that I really don't need it anymore. But that is on certain occasions something that I will do. If you guys are iPhone users, check the description below. I have a link to the app so you guys can check it out yourself. Okay, so if you're watching this video and you're a seasoned backpacker, do me a favor and help me out. I have reached a point where I can no longer get to all of the comments in videos. Make sure you help and answer questions below for me. Make sure you're helping people by being encouraging and uplifting. If you're not, I will ban you. I've gotten good at the ban button. But make sure that you're helping people in their quest to learn more about backpacking and get better at the hobby. All right, guys, if you like this video, make sure you hit that like button. Also, subscribe for more. Make sure you hit the bell notification so that I can send you a video every time it's released. And I will see you on the next one.